In the heart of the city, at the exclusive La Pouvane restaurant, opulence bathed every corner, gleaming under the soft glow of chandeliers. The delicate melody of a piano permeated the velvety silence of the evening. Each table, adorned with candles and crystal, served as a quiet domain of power and prestige. In an isolated corner, tucked away behind an orchid arrangement, sat Adrian Maxwell, a 48-year-old tech magnate, billionaire, and widower. His impeccably tailored Armani suit and platinum watch, though catching the light, couldn't conceal the hollowness he felt. He gazed absently at the untouched filet mignon before him, its inviting aroma unnoticed, smelling to him like mere dust. The empty chair opposite him echoed louder than any other sound in the opulent room. He tightened his fingers slightly around the stem of a Bordeaux glass, the wine swirling within like a ghost. A decade had passed since the tragic accident that claimed the lives of his wife Ohana and their 3-year-old son Josh, in a mangled mass of twisted metal and shattered glass. Since then, Adrian had plunged into a life of silence, routine, and a vast empire of distractions. He lifted the glass slowly, as if its weight bore old memories. Just as he brought it to his lips, a soft, trembling, and unexpected voice interrupted him. A young woman, appearing no older than 19, stood beside his table asking if she might have his leftovers. Adrian froze, then sharply turned his head to face her. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a loose, messy bun, with worn strands falling around her face. Her threadbare coat clung to her shoulders, offering little protection against the early autumn chill. In her arms, a baby, perhaps 7 or 8 months old, was swaddled in a faded blanket. The child's large, luminous eyes were fixed on the portion of mashed potatoes and the slices of meat still steaming on Adrian's plate. The girl's whispered request, faint though it was, cut through the restaurant's silence, startling everyone like a snapped violin string. Adrian blinked, as if waking from a deep sleep. The dining room fell silent. Forks paused midair, and conversations dissolved into stunned quiet. A waiter, his brow furrowed with concern, began to approach, but Adrian subtly raised an imperious hand to stop him. Adrian studied her face, noting the absence of shame, manipulation, or a plea for pity. Instead, he saw profound exhaustion and a silent, intense ferocity. A desperate need, not for herself, but for the tiny life she cradled against her chest. Kate? She held the child with a protective devotion that eclipsed everything else in that moment. She wasn't begging, she wasn't stealing, she was simply surviving. Adrian's throat tightened, and the candle between them flickered. In that instant, something shifted within him. It wasn't a grand revelation, not yet, but a faint murmur, a flicker. Unbeknownst to him at the time, that single moment, that solitary question, would ultimately dismantle the emotional barriers he had built over a decade, guiding him toward an unexpected redemption and a love he never sought. He remained paralyzed for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the girl as if the world around him had dissolved into background noise. Her disheveled blonde hair fell in messy waves around her face and shoulders, catching the candlelight like fractured gold. Her coat, with sleeves too short and thin fabric at the elbows, barely covered her frame. On her feet, a pair of worn sneakers, soaked with city grime and nearly tearing at the seams, completed her attire. Yet, it wasn't her appearance that captivated Adrian, it was her eyes. They neither pleaded nor wavered, holding his gaze unflinchingly. They were filled with something far more potent than despair, defiance, dignity, and a silent, almost unbearable sorrow. Her expression held a kind of courage, one forged only when there's nothing left to protect but a fragile life. She wasn't asking for herself. She was asking for her child. Adrian hesitated for another brief instant, as if an invisible thread stretched between them. Then, with a slight motion, he pushed the plate forward, softly murmuring for her to take it. She didn't pounce on the food, nor did she devour it like someone starving. Instead, with a reverence that impacted him more profoundly than any outcry, she reached into the bag slung over her shoulder. From it, she produced a small piece of clean cloth, albeit frayed at the edges. Carefully, she wrapped the mashed potatoes and the remaining slices of meat, folding the corners as if preserving a treasure, not mere leftovers. Then, gently kneeling, she nestled the baby closer and retrieved a small plastic spoon from her coat pocket. Adrian watched, captivated, as she scooped a modest portion of the warm food, gently blew on it, and guided the spoon to the baby's mouth. The child's mouth opened instinctively, tiny lips parting, tongue extended. The moment the mashed potatoes touched his tongue, he cooed, a soft, bubbling sound of pure joy that made Adrian's fingers curl at the edge of the table. The baby's face lit up in the candlelight, his chubby hands patting the girl's chest. A smile bloomed on his round cheeks, like a sunrise after a long, icy night. It was the kind of smile Adrian hadn't seen in years, not since his own son's. A lump formed in his throat, and he looked away for a second, trying to clear the sudden mist from his vision. But his gaze quickly returned as the baby let out another joyful sigh, as if the warmth of a single spoonful was enough to fill him with delight. The girl remained silent, patiently feeding him one spoonful at a time. Her hands were steady, her breathing calm. She didn't once look around to see who might be judging her. She disregarded the opinions of the well-heeled onlookers. Her sole concern was feeding her child. Adrian's heart felt a profound squeeze, a sensation of something ancient stirring within him. It wasn't pity or charity. It was the realization he was witnessing, a sacred love, something immeasurable and unattainable for those who hadn't known loss. Once the baby seemed satisfied, the young woman tucked the cloth-wrapped bundle into her bag, adjusted the blanket around her son, and stood. She cast Adrian a final glance, nodding. It wasn't a gesture of thanks, but a silent acknowledgement of something understood between them. Then she turned and walked away, weaving between the luxurious tables until she vanished through the glass doors into the cold night. Adrian remained motionless, his eyes fixed on the spot where she had been. The candle on the table flickered softly, casting golden ripples and shadows over the untouched wine, the empty chair, and the world he knew. Then, before he could rationalize or reconsider, he rose, not with haste or drama, but with resolute stillness. He placed his napkin on the table, nodded once to the stunned waiter who had been watching him. and followed the young woman through the heavy restaurant doors into the night. He still didn't grasp the reason, only knowing he had to. Adrian followed her at a distance, his footsteps muffled against the quiet asphalt. The city's din faded behind him as the girl slipped into a narrow alleyway. Holding the baby close to her chest like a fragile shield against the world. She moved swiftly but cautiously, as if every shadow might swallow her whole. Adrian didn't know why he followed her, only that something deeper than curiosity compelled him. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. The alley opened into a dilapidated parking lot, flanked by brick buildings. Abandoned cars lay like ghosts. But one, an old dented Navy sedan, was different. It was inhabited. The windows were fogged, the paint peeling, yet it served as shelter. She walked to it without hesitation, opened the back door, and carefully settled herself inside with the baby. A thin blanket served as a mattress. She nestled the baby in her arms, whispering something only the child could hear. Then her voice, soft and trembling, rose in a lullaby. She sang, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Adrian remained in the shadows. He stood motionless, mesmerized. The baby's hand clutched her collar, and the little one's eyes fluttered as the melody enveloped him like a warm blanket. The setting was bleak, but the love undeniable. Adrian stepped forward. Something must have alerted her, for she turned, startled, and their gazes met. With his hands raised in a gesture of peace, Adrian offered an apology, explaining that he only wanted to know if she was all right. Cautiously, she stated that he had followed her. Adrian confirmed it. She neither fled nor wept. She simply observed him, assessing the stranger in expensive clothes. Adrian added that he had witnessed her feeding her son and had never seen anything quite like it, feeling a need to understand. After a pause, she softly revealed the boy's name was Noah, and that she was Carol. Adrian repeated the name, asking if Noah was 8 months old. She confirmed it, adding that he adored mashed potatoes. Adrian's voice softened as he remarked that his son had also liked them. Carol blinked, and in that instant, something shifted. She asked no questions, only listened with the rare stillness of one intimately acquainted with pain. Carol recounted that she had been studying to be a nurse, but she got pregnant and the child's father disappeared. Her parents had rejected her, and she had been on her own ever since. She narrated the facts with objectivity, without bitterness. They had been living in that car for 2 months, and she picked up work cleaning houses and waitressing whenever she could. Adrian observed the vehicle, the worn blanket, and the baby clothes piled like a treasure in the corner. He offered help, a hotel, food, whatever she needed, trays to hand, stating she wasn't asking for money. Surprised, he asked what she did want. Carol looked at Noah and softly replied that all she wanted was one day. One day where he was warm, fed, and safe. That was all. Her words struck him harder than any demand could have. The street lamp flickered above them, casting an amber hue over her face. In that glow, Adrian saw something familiar in her eyes. The eyes of his late wife. Not exactly the same, but close enough to break something open within him. The way Carol held her son and how she carried herself with nothing but love as her armor awakened something in Adrian, something buried alongside his wife and child, He recoiled, suddenly unsteady on his feet. He offered his thanks. Carol, her brow furrowed, asked why. Adrian responded that it was for reminding him he still had a heart. She said nothing, only nestled Noah closer, resuming the lullaby. Adrian remained there for a while longer, the melody stretching into the night like a thread of hope. Though Carol didn't smile, she didn't shut the door on him either, and that, somehow, meant everything. From that night on, Adrian couldn't shake the image of the girl with the worn shoes and the baby with the mashed potato smile. No matter how many emails he read or meetings he attended, their faces lingered in his mind. They were silent reminders that in the same city where $8,000 wine was savored, Kay, a mother and her child were surviving purely on kindness and resilience. Adrian didn't approach her directly again right away. Kay, instead, he began to act with silent precision, just as he had built his fortune. Kay found her car again, parked behind an abandoned church lot. Without approaching or intruding, he left small packages near the vehicle in the early hours of the morning before sunrise. A can of baby formula, a pack of diapers, a sealed container of homemade soup, still warm. He also arranged for a pediatrician to discreetly visit her, posing as part of a church outreach program. Carol didn't know who had sent him and didn't ask. But when the doctor left, she hugged Noah longer than usual and whispered a soft thank you to no one in particular. At first, Carol remained skeptical. She had learned to survive by expecting disappointment. Yet these silent gestures never came with notes, expectations, or demands. No one asked her for a smile or gratitude. It was simply something present, constant, kind, and real. Little by little, distrust gave way too. Hope, something far more dangerous, began to emerge. Then, one October night, as the cold began to intensify, disaster struck. Noah was irritable and had no appetite. His forehead was warm, but by nightfall, a high fever consumed him. Carol tried everything: cool cloths, soft lullabies, rocking him in the car's back seat. Yet his cries became more urgent, his breathing shallow and rapid. She rushed to the nearest hospital emergency room. The receptionist barely looked up as Carol explained her son needed help. When asked about health insurance, Carol hesitated. When Carol admitted she had no insurance, the woman's face hardened. "We're at full capacity," she said dryly. "You'll have to wait or find another facility." Carol's voice cracked. "He's just a baby. He has a 104-degree fever and isn't responding." "Please," the receptionist replied. "Ma'am, we can't do anything without admission details. I'm sorry." Carol stepped outside, her breath fogging in the frigid air. Noah had gone silent, a terrifying quiet. She held him tighter than ever, her body shaking with cold and panic. There was only one thing left to do. She pulled out her old phone and, with trembling fingers, typed just 2 words: "Help us." She didn't know if he'd come or why she trusted he even could. But 6 minutes later, headlights swept across the sidewalk. Adrian's black SUV screeched to a halt. He leaped out before the engine even cut off, his coat flapping in the wind, his eyes wild with urgency. He didn't say a word. He simply held out his arms. Carol placed Noah into them. And for the first time, the baby didn't resist. his tiny hand wrapped around Adrian's index finger. Weak, but intentional, as if recognizing something safe. Adrian cradled him with surprising familiarity and walked back into the hospital, bypassing the line. "I want a doctor now," he told the receptionist, his voice firm and cutting. "This child has a critical fever. I'll cover every cent. But if you let another minute pass, I'll buy this hospital and fire every last one of you." They attended to Noah immediately. Carol sank into a chair in the hallway, shaking with exhaustion, her head in her hands. Adrian remained beside her, silent. When the nurse returned with the news, Noah was stable, resting, and would be monitored overnight. Carol let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding since sunset. She looked at Adrian, eyes brimming, her voice barely audible. "You came," he nodded. "Of course I came." Tears spilled before she could stop them. She leaned into him, her chest heaving with relief and something deeper. Perhaps it was grief, perhaps liberation. Her head rested on his shoulder, and Adrian, without hesitation, held her. He didn't tell her to calm down or to explain herself. He simply held her as the silent hours of the night ticked by outside those sterile, fluorescent walls. It was the first time Carol had allowed herself to crumble since becoming a mother. And for Adrian, it was the first time in 10 years that holding someone didn't feel like a betrayal. They didn't speak of love nor define anything that night. But something irrevocably shifted in that instant, in the steady heartbeat of the man who had once sworn never to care again, and in the breath of the girl who had only known how to survive. Not because he had saved her, but because, finally, she didn't have to be strong alone. It all began with a slightly blurry photo snapped at night of Adrian Maxwell leaving an emergency room with a baby in his arms and a young woman close behind. Within hours, it flooded social media, blogs, and tabloid headlines. Tech billionaire, nighttime rescue, teen mom, and the mogul. The internet blew up. Carol's identity didn't remain a secret for long. A leaked hospital admission form confirmed her name. Then came the comments. Waves of speculation, judgment, and cruelty. Some praised Adrian, calling him compassionate and generous. Others were malicious. "She's a gold digger. This was planned. What kind of man gets involved in something like this?" In the apartment Adrian had provided for her and Noah, Carol sat in the darkness, the only light coming from her phone. Every swipe of the screen brought more venom, every headline more shame. Her chest tightened, her hands trembled. She turned off the screen, afraid the light might touch her child with the same venom. Noah stirred in his crib. She got up and gently placed her hand on his chest, soothing him. Then she returned to sit on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor until morning. When Adrian entered, he knew something had shifted. Carol's posture was closed off, her expression distant. "I can't do this," she said. "I don't want my son growing up amidst scandals. I don't want him to see lies one day and wonder if they're true." Adrian sat beside her. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said softly. Neither did Noah. She shook her head. "People don't care. They've already decided who I am." Adrian's voice firmed. "Then let me tell them who you really are." That afternoon, he called his publicist. No statements, no scripted press releases. He wanted to speak plainly, publicly, and unfiltered. The following night, he went live on national television. The setup was simple: a quiet studio, soft lighting, no distractions. The interviewer asked no sensational questions, merely giving him space to speak. Adrian began not with Carol, but with Ohana and Josh. He told the story he had avoided for years: the accident, the silence, how grief had hollowed him out. He spoke of the illusion of success and how it had masked a very real emptiness. "I stopped living the day they died," he said. And then he spoke of Carol. She wasn't looking for charity. He said she wasn't even looking for help. She just wanted to feed her child. And in doing so, she woke something up in me that I thought I'd lost forever. His voice broke as he added, "She didn't take anything from me. She gave me something no one else could. A reason to care again, a reason to breathe." He looked into the camera. Carol isn't a headline. She's a mother. Noah isn't a prop. He's a beautiful child. I didn't save them. They saved me. The interview was raw. It was authentic, unprotected, and deeply human. And it worked. The next morning, the tide turned. Online conversations transformed. People began to defend her. Mothers shared their stories: single motherhood, poverty, judgment. Nurses spoke out, explaining how many girls like Carol fall through the cracks of the system. Donations began to flow to shelters. A mother in Kansas started a community fund for women like Carol. Carol didn't speak to the press. But the next morning, she appeared at Adrian's front door. Noah bundled against the cold. She didn't knock. He opened the door before she even could. Her eyes were tired, but with a determined gaze, she said, "I'm not leaving. If you still want us, we're here." Adrian didn't speak. He stepped aside, let them in, and for the first time in years, felt something shift permanently and peacefully. A door, not just in his home, but in his heart, had opened. An unexpected, unscripted family had begun. The apartment Adrian leased for them wasn't extravagant, modest by his standards, but it was cozy, sunlit, and quiet. It had 2 bedrooms, soft gray walls, and windows that caught the morning light perfectly. Carol moved in with just 2 suitcases, a baby carrier, and the weight of someone who had never had a safe place to breathe. But within a week, that space began to feel lived in. Noah's colorful drawings taped to the fridge, tiny socks hanging on the radiator, the scent of baby lotion and lullabies hanging in the air. They never discussed what they were to each other, not at first. There were no declarations, no labels, no timelines. They simply lived together. Adrian visited every morning. At first, it was under the guise of checking in, bringing groceries, or a pack of diapers, but it soon became routine. He would knock, enter, and Noah would light up at the sight of him, bouncing in his crib at the sound of the door. Carol would already have coffee brewing, her hair in that same loose, elegant bun, and they would share stories over breakfast. Adrian learned to hold a bottle at the right angle, to warm milk without overheating it, to change a diaper clumsily at first, then with a confidence that surprised him. He memorized the rhythm of Noah's cries, understood the difference between hunger and discomfort, tiredness and frustration. One afternoon, while rocking Noah to sleep, the baby's tiny hand clutching his shirt, Adrian realized he realized something simple yet impactful. He didn't want to leave. Not after the nap, not after the next hour. He wanted to stay. Carol noticed too. The way Adrian lingered, how he listened to Noah's babbling as if it were symphonies. He never tried to impress or control. He simply showed up day after day with quiet hands and eyes that had once been empty, but were now slowly filling with light. She had never known a love that asked for nothing in return, nor a man who was simply present. He wasn't there to fix her or to take ownership of her story, but to walk alongside her in it. In the soft hours between feedings and baths, a new connection formed. It wasn't the fiery kind of love the world romanticizes. It was slower, deeper, born not of passion, but of persistence. One evening, after Noah finally fell asleep, Carol and Adrian sat on the porch in silence, a blanket between them. The city below shimmered in gold and blue, but neither of them looked down. Adrian turned to her, his voice soft. "When I lost Ohana and Josh, I thought that part of me had died with them. The part that wanted to care, to belong, to be needed." Carol looked at him, her eyes shining. She whispered, "You didn't lose it, you just waited." They didn't kiss that night. They didn't need to. The moment stretched between them like a promise, unspoken yet deeply understood. And in that instant, Carol smiled. Not the kind of smile she gave nurses out of politeness or Noah out of reflex. This one was just for him, complete and rare. For the first time in years, Adrian smiled back. A real quiet smile, softened by healing, lit from within. They weren't lovers yet, not formally a family yet, but they were something stronger. Two people who had been shattered by loss and found in each other the slow, steady beginning of a home. It arrived one afternoon in a simple white envelope, slipped under the apartment door like an unexpected gust of wind. Carol stared at it for a long time before opening it, her hands trembling slightly as she unfolded the letter. The handwriting was familiar, tight, neat, and unmistakably her mother's. There were only a few lines, no grand apologies, no dramatic pleas, just simple words penned with ink that seemed to press too hard into the page. "If there's still a chance to meet my grandson, I'd like to try." Carol sat at the kitchen table for over an hour. The crumpled letter lay soft in her hands as Noah played nearby with his stack of colorful blocks. She didn't cry, nor did she get angry. But the silence that filled the room was thick enough to suffocate. When Adrian arrived that night, he found her in the same spot. She wrote, Carol said softly, without looking up. He approached, picked up the letter, and read it. Then he placed it back down and sat beside her. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "It's been almost 2 years since they last spoke to me, since they told me I wasn't their daughter anymore." Adrian nodded slowly. "You don't owe them anything." Carol turned to him, her eyes clouded with uncertainty. "But Noah, doesn't he deserve to know where he came from, even if it's from a broken place?" Adrian paused, choosing his words carefully. "Don't let him grow up with the same emptiness you did. Let him have the chance to forgive or not, but let him choose." 3 days later, they traveled to the town Carol had once called home. A sleepy stretch of green hills and narrow roads where every face seemed to remember the past a little too much. Her parents' house sat at the end of a gravel driveway, the white paint a little faded, the porch swing still. The swing still creaked in the wind. Carol stood still for several long moments, Noah in her arms, his tiny hands clutched to her sweater. Adrian remained slightly behind her, offering silent support but letting her lead. The front door opened slowly. A woman emerged, in her 50s, with striking features softened by time and sorrow. Carol's mother. For an instant, no one moved. Then, with a trembling breath, the mother stepped forward. Her eyes landed on Noah, then on Carol, and instantly filled with tears. "I wasn't strong," she whispered, her voice thick. "I was afraid of what people would think. I was afraid of losing the daughter I believed I had raised, and yet I lost you anyway," Carol's mother said. Carol remained silent, her lips slightly parted, her jaw tight. Her father appeared behind her mother, older than she remembered, his hands nervously clasped in front of him. He looked at his grandson as if seeing something sacred. Noah reached out a hand, knowing nothing of the history, caring nothing, just curious. And that somehow undid everything. Her mother broke, stepping forward, arms open but unsure. Can I hold him?" Carol hesitated for a moment. Then, slowly, she placed Noah in her mother's arms. The older woman held him as if trying to hold back time itself. She sobbed softly, whispering things to the boy, who looked up at her with wide-eyed innocence. Adrian watched from the side, his chest tight. He wasn't part of that moment, but he witnessed its power. When Carol finally stepped forward and embraced her mother, the porch seemed to breathe. The past hadn't vanished, but it had been softened. Forgiveness wasn't a lightning bolt. It was a slow sunrise. That afternoon, 3 generations sat around the old kitchen table where Carol had once eaten cereal before school. Her mother served tea, and her father gently bounced Noah on his knee. And for the first time in years, there was laughter in that house. Carol caught Adrian's eye from across the room, and he smiled. She mouthed 2 simple words, "Thank you." He shook his head, smiling back. "No," he whispered to himself, almost inaudible. "Thank you for coming home." A year later, the world had changed, but only in the ways that truly mattered. The noise had faded, the headlines disappeared. In their place, there was something far more silent and powerful. A life. It was a clear spring afternoon when they returned to the park, the same park where everything began. The breeze moved gently through the trees, and the golden sunlight bathed the open field in a warmth that felt like a blessing. There were no towering floral arches or photographers vying for the perfect shot, just a small group of intimate friends, a white linen cloth spread under an ancient oak, and a humble wooden arch wrapped in ivy and ribbon. At the center of it all stood a little boy in a new navy vest and a matching boatie. Noah, now almost 2, clutched a small velvet box with both hands as he toddled across the grass, determined to deliver it to the man waiting just a few feet away. Adrian stood there, not in a designer suit, but in a soft gray blazer Carol once said made him look almost human. His hair was longer now, with silver streaks he no longer bothered to hide. His eyes, once clouded by pain, now shone with something far rarer than wealth: hope. When Noah reached him, Adrian knelt and gently took the box from his tiny fingers. The boy looked up and giggled, then toddled back towards the edge of the clearing, where Carol stood barefoot in the grass, her white dress fluttering in the breeze. She'd never looked more beautiful, not because of the dress nor the sun behind her, but because of the life in her eyes, the kind of radiance that only blooms after surviving darkness. Adrian stepped forward, box in hand, and knelt. For a moment, the wind seemed to stop, as if the whole world paused to listen. He looked at her, his voice firm, yet choked with emotion. "You asked for nothing," he said softly. "You didn't beg, you didn't wait. You simply showed up on the worst night of your life and gave me the chance to remember what it's like to be needed, what it's like to be alive." He opened the box, revealing a simple, elegant, understated ring, chosen not for its price, but for how it would look on her hand when she held their son. "You didn't take my leftovers, Carol," he whispered. "You gave me everything I didn't know I was missing. You gave me a family. You gave me love. You gave me a future." He paused, tears glinting in his eyes. "Will you marry me?" Carol's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes welled up before the first tear could fall. She nodded once, twice, then dropped to her knees in front of him, laughing through her tears as she whispered, "Yes." They embraced, arms intertwining like pieces of a long-lost puzzle finally found. The minister began the ceremony, simple and short, while Noah played with petals on the ground, occasionally looking up as if trying to understand what made the adults so emotional. But it was during the vows, just as Adrian promised to love not only Carol, but the child who had brought them together, that Noah approached and hugged Adrian's leg. "Daddy," he piped up. And suddenly, the entire park held its breath. Adrian looked down, eyes misty, and bent to pick up the boy. Holding him with one arm and Carol with the other, he whispered, "I love you, son." In that embrace, under the sun, with no audience but a few friends and the sky, everything what was once broken finally seemed complete. Adrian hadn't rescued a young mother. She had rescued him from pain, from isolation, from a life as sophisticated as it was empty that had nearly consumed him entirely. In place of loneliness, a new family had been born. Not by blood, nor by design, but from a whisper, a question, and a plate of mashed potatoes. They weren't perfect, and they didn't need to be. They were together, and that, ultimately, was enough. Thus, from a simple whisper in a luxury restaurant, a story of love, redemption, and second chances unfolded. What began as a request for leftovers transformed into a journey that redefined the meaning of family. Adrian not only opened his heart, but also his life. Carol not only survived, but found a home. And little Noah, once cradled in the arms of a stranger, now walks beside a father who chose him, not by blood, but by love. For sometimes the most extraordinary stories are born from the quietest moments. The story of Adrian, Carol, and Noah is a testament that compassion can be the most powerful of miracles, and that the narratives which truly touch the soul often remind us of the capacity for healing and hope. That resides in the simplest gestures.